Hi guys, I'm Randy with BRStv, and on today's Spotlight we're exploring the BRS Kalkwasser starter package as one of the easiest methods to maintain alkalinity and calcium in your tank. In this Spotlight we'll walk through the 3 ways to use kalk, as well as show you a 2-phase process for initial setup and ongoing use or replenishment. Using Kalkwasser or calcium hydroxide to maintain your tank's alkalinity and calcium can be one of the simplest, easiest, and most inexpensive approaches out there. Not only that, but it's able to maintain those parameters using one single additive as opposed to other 2 or more part dosing methods. Kalkwasser also naturally increases pH in the tank, so when used in small doses throughout the day, it can help to keep you in those higher pH ranges that many reefers typically aim for. Our BRS Kalk is one of the only Kalkwasser options out there that uses USP pharmaceutical-grade calcium hydroxide as the source material, meaning that buying it directly not only gets you more for less, but the source material is independently verified with the same strict quality standards used in the pharmaceutical industry. Best of all, it comes packaged inside resealable stand-up 2-pound and 4-pound pouches with proper moisture barriers to keep the kalk lasting almost indefinitely. The amount of Kalkwasser needed for your tank is primarily dependent on your tank's daily demand for alkalinity and calcium, yet a single 2-pound bag should yield you somewhere in the ballpark of over 300 teaspoons, which typically lasts most reefers about 3 to 6 months on average. However, for those of you with much higher demands or larger tanks, a 4-pound bag with double the amount of kalk may be a more economical choice. For those of you just starting your tank on Kalkwasser, the most popular option and the one we recommend is the BRS Kalkwasser Starter Package. This package not only includes a 2-pound bulk pouch of kalk, but will also include enough calcium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, and general adjustment magnesium mix to make a full gallon solution of each. These are needed to make initial or occasional adjustments to your tank's alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. You should know that Kalkwasser or calcium hydroxide is only designed to replace small amounts of alkalinity and calcium consumed daily and is not a recommended tool to make larger adjustments because larger doses will elevate pH beyond recommended levels. Also, kalk doesn't replace magnesium levels depleted from the tank, which is why we suggest using calcium chloride, sodium bicarb, and magnesium mix for those larger increases of each parameter, and which is why they're included. As we'll discuss a bit later, there are 3 common approaches to dosing Kalkwasser to your tank: by dripping it slowly into the tank throughout the day, using your auto top-off pump and reservoir to dose based on your tank's evaporation, and by using a kalk stirrer and feed pump. With that in mind, you could build your own dripper, and we offer this DIY dripper kit to help you convert any container into a dosing vessel. For the ATO approach, we recommend using a higher quality auto top-off, preferably one with a built-in max runtime like the popular Tunzi oscillator, to help prevent chances of an overdose. There's a few options out there for kalk stirrers like these from Avast or Reef Octopus, which you'll likely want to size one that fits your tank's demands and available space. Since you'll likely be measuring your dry Kalkwasser powder in smaller doses, having a set of measuring spoons will come in handy. Along with that, in order to be sure your dosing is keeping up with your demands, having an accurate test kit for alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium is almost a necessity, and you can pick up a kit like this one from Red Sea, which includes all 3. As I mentioned, there are 2 simple phases to get Kalkwasser started on your tank, in which case the first phase is to stabilize your tank's parameters and make initial adjustments to alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. To get started, I can mix up the pre-measured pouches of sodium bicarb, calcium chloride, and magnesium mix with RODI water or purified water to make 1-gallon solutions of each. With my correction solutions mixed up, I can now test my tank's current levels for alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium, which we typically shoot for around 8 DKH for alk, 420 parts per million for calcium, and around 1350 parts per million for magnesium. If you find your levels to be lower than those recommendations, you can use our Reef Calculator to determine how to correct them. Simply enter your total water volume, which is your tank size plus sump minus the rock and sand, but don't get too hung up on getting this number perfect. Now you can enter the results of your test, your desired level, hit the calculate button, and you'll get an accurate dosage amount needed to raise your tank. For example, if I had 100 gallons of total system water volume and tested my calcium levels at 380 parts per million, I can input that into the calculator, enter my target 420 parts per million, select the BRS Calcium Liquid Solution Pharma Pouch, and find that I need to dose my tank 409 milliliters. Following the directions in the calculator, I'll dose that amount, wait about a half an hour, and retest my tank to confirm the results. Now do the same for alkalinity and magnesium, make any necessary corrections, and you're ready to start phase 2. A couple important notes about making initial adjustments to your tank. You'll notice instructions and dosing recommendations on the Reef Calculator for each correction solution. If you need to make larger adjustments than what's recommended in a single day, you may want to spread it out over 2 or more days as needed. Along with that, dosing the sodium bicarb and calcium solutions independently with at least an hour or more between them will help to keep them from precipitating. Let's move on to phase 2, where we'll discuss the 3 most common ways to utilize calcium hydroxide to supplement your tank, which is by slowly dripping a Kalkwasser solution into the tank, mixing your Kalkwasser in your auto top-off reservoir, or setting up a kalk reactor or stirrer. Many reefers are first introduced to dosing kalk by using a drip method that slowly releases a saturated kalk solution into the tank using gravity. There are a few ways to start this approach, but for those of you who want everything you need to DIY your own dripper, we have the dripper kit. The key to using a dripper is to choose a storage container similar in size to your tank's daily evaporation. That way you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by replenishing the lost evaporated water and supplementing kalk. For dosing with a kalk dripper, if you have a tank with a pretty low demand for alkalinity and calcium, like a tank with a few LPS corals here and there, you'll probably only need a concentrated solution of about ½ a teaspoon for every 1 gallon of purified RODI water. If you have a medium demand tank, 1 teaspoon per gallon of water will work, while a fully saturated solution of 2 teaspoons per 1 gallon of water is best for higher demand tanks like those with a few SPS. One note here, 2 teaspoons is the max amount of Kalkwasser that will dissolve into 1 gallon of water, and adding more than that will not increase the potency. Once you start to see solid results from maintaining alkalinity and calcium, eventually you may soon find that the daily task of mixing your dosage becomes a bit time consuming, and dosing can be much easier by letting an auto top-off do the work for you. Using an ATO can offer longer periods between mixing new batches, as well as a more accurate way to more precisely match your tank's evaporation rate, and is probably the easiest method of dosing Kalkwasser in the long term. If you opt for the ATO delivery method, we recommend using a container that can supply 1 week's worth of top-off water and mix your kalk at the same ratios as a kalk dripper. As an example, if I calculate my weekly evaporation rate to be about 10 gallons, in my 10-gallon ATO reservoir, I'll mix 1/2 a teaspoon per gallon for low-demand tanks, so in this case, I'll use 5 teaspoons in my 10-gallon ATO reservoir. For medium-demand tanks, I'll use 1 teaspoon per gallon of water from a total of 10 teaspoons in my 10-gallon reservoir, and for those higher-demand tanks, max saturation at 2 teaspoons per gallon or 20 teaspoons in my 10-gallon reservoir should work. One important note about mixing larger solutions of Kalkwasser, it's normal for a crust to develop on the surface of your reservoir water, which helps to protect the solution from losing potency by being exposed to ambient CO2. In which case it's best not to disturb or mix the solution after initially mixing the saturated water. Finally, some reefers choose to dose Kalkwasser by using a kalk stirrer to create a fully saturated solution where fresh water is pumped through a kalk slurry that's mixing in the bottom of a reactor. This method typically requires a freshwater reservoir near the tank to feed the stirrer, which is controlled by using a dosing pump and dosed to the tank based on the daily alkalinity and consumption rates, which may be less than what's evaporated. If the dosage is less than the tank evaporates in a single day, you could use a separate ATO to make up for the difference. There are a couple things you can do for maintenance regardless of the kalk delivery method to keep your equipment functioning properly and protect your tank from any potential overdoses. As we talked about for the dripper method, properly sizing your container to the same or less volume than what's evaporated in a single day can help to prevent an accidental overdose. Along with that, keeping the container, lines, and dripper clean will help to maintain an accurate drip rate each time. If you're using an ATO for adding kalk to your tank, it's important to note that there will be a bit of kalk slurry that settles at the bottom of your reservoir, which you'll want to keep the ATO pump from sucking in. It's the clear liquid that we want to dose to our tank, so it's good practice to raise the pump slightly or set it in a separate container at the bottom of your reservoir to keep the slurry from entering your tank and to save the pump from any extra wear and tear. Kalkwasser can be pretty hard on ATO pumps and may wear it quicker than normal, which is why it's a good idea to rinse your ATO reservoir after each batch, as well as clean any calcification off the pump by using some citric acid like this from Toonsy or a 50-50 vinegar to water mixture. Lastly, for both the ATO and caulk stirrer approaches, if you have an aquarium controller with pH monitoring, it's a great idea to control the ATO pump or stirrer dosing pump using pH parameters to shut it off if your tank starts to climb in pH, which may be an indication that too much Kalkwasser is being dosed to the tank. As with all auto top-offs, you can prevent siphoning and ultimately overdosing the tank by ensuring that the dosing tube is higher than the reservoir. Thanks for watching, and if you have any more questions that we didn't answer here, feel free to give us a call, send us an email, or hop on a chat. See you next time on BRS TV.